Your phone was fast when you bought it, blazing fast. Apps opened instantly. The camera launched in a fraction of a second. Scrolling felt like glass. Then, somewhere around month 18 or 24, something changed. Nothing dramatic. No single moment you can point to. Just a slow, creeping heaviness. A half-second delay here. A stuttered animation there. And eventually, you start thinking the same thought millions of people think every year. Maybe it's time for a new phone. That thought is worth billions of dollars to the companies that make your phone. And today, we're going to talk about exactly why. Let's start with the explanation you've probably already heard, because it's the one manufacturers love to give. Your phone feels slower, they say, because it's getting older. Hardware degrades, batteries wear down. The laws of physics apply to your device just like everything else. This explanation is technically true. It is also strategically incomplete. Because the real story of why your phone slows down is not primarily a hardware story. It's a software story. And the software is entirely within human control. The first mechanism is the most documented and the most controversial. Operating system updates. Every year, Apple releases a new version of iOS. Google releases a new version of Android. These updates are marketed as improvements, new features, better security, enhanced privacy controls, and they do contain all of those things. What they also contain is code that is optimized for the newest hardware, running on processors that are faster, with RAM that is larger, and chips that are architecturally more advanced than what was inside your 2-year-old device. When that new operating system installs on older hardware, the result is predictable. Your phone has to work harder to run software it was never designed to run. The experience degrades. Apple found this out publicly and painfully in 2017, when a developer named John Poole published performance benchmarks showing that iPhones with degraded batteries were being throttled, deliberately slowed down, by iOS. Apple's official explanation was that this was a protective measure, designed to prevent unexpected shutdowns caused by batteries that could no longer deliver peak power on demand. That explanation was accurate. It was also a confession that the company had been quietly slowing down older phones without telling users. Apple paid them $113 million in a settlement with U.S. states over the practice. They added a battery health feature to iOS so users could see their battery condition. They lowered the price of battery replacements. And then the story largely moved on. But the throttling story was never really about the battery. The battery was the mechanism. The underlying dynamic was something more structural. Here is what planned obsolescence actually means in the context of smartphones, because the term gets used loosely and that imprecision lets manufacturers off the hook. Classic planned obsolescence, the kind Ralph Nader wrote about and the kind associated with mid-century American manufacturing, meant physically building products to fail after a certain period. Cheap components, thin materials, engineering fragility into the design so the customer would be forced back into the market. Modern smartphone obsolescence is more sophisticated than that. It operates through software, through the update cycle, and through the deliberate management of what is and is not supported. Your phone's hardware does not fail. The processor in a 2-year-old iPhone is still a capable processor. The cameras still take good photos. The glass is still intact. What changes is the software environment around that hardware. The software environment is entirely controlled by the manufacturer. When Apple announces that a new version of iOS will not support the iPhone X, they are not reporting a technical limitation. They are making a business decision. The iPhone X has hardware that could, in many cases, run a stripped-down version of newer iOS features. What it cannot do is run them with the same performance as the iPhone 15. So the choice becomes, support the old device and accept that some users will have a degraded experience, or cut the old device off and push those users toward an upgrade. Manufacturers consistently choose the latter. The math is not complicated. Android manufacturers operate the same system, but with an added layer of fragmentation that makes the problem worse. When Google releases a new version of Android, it does not go directly to your Samsung or OnePlus or Xiaomi device. It goes to the manufacturer, who then has to adapt it for their custom interface, One UI, Oxygen OS, MIUI, test it across their device lineup, and then push it out. This process takes months. It also creates a financial calculation. Updating software for a phone that is 2 or 3 years old costs engineering time and resources. That phone is not generating new revenue. The incentive to invest in maintaining it is low. The result is that the average Android phone in the mid-price range receives roughly 2 years of operating system updates. After that, it continues to receive security patches for a limited time, and then it receives nothing. The device still works, but it is now running an older operating system in an ecosystem where apps are being designed for newer ones. Performance gaps widen. Security vulnerabilities accumulate. The user experience erodes. Samsung has improved this significantly in recent years, extending their flagship update commitment to 4 OS updates and 5 years of security patches. Google's Pixel line now promises 7 years. But these are premium products at premium prices, and they are the exception, not the rule in the broader Android market. Now let's talk about apps, because this is the mechanism that affects you most directly and the one that gets the least attention. Every major app on your phone, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp, Google Maps, TikTok, is updated regularly, sometimes weekly. These updates add features, fix bugs, and optimize performance. They also grow. The Instagram app in 2016 was roughly 30 megabytes. The Instagram app today is over 200 megabytes. It is not 600% more useful. It is 600% heavier because it contains more tracking infrastructure, more embedded features, more video processing capability, more code that was written, assuming the user has a recent device with ample processing power and RAM. This process is called software bloat, and it is a natural consequence of how app development works. Engineers add features. They do not always remove the old ones. Codebases accumulate. Each new version is tested on current hardware, because that is what the engineering team has on their desks. The experience on a 2-year-old device is not a priority because 2-year-old devices are not where the new users are. The combined effect of OS updates and app bloat creates a compounding problem. Your phone's hardware is fixed. The software demands on that hardware increase every single year. At some point, the gap between what the software requires and what the hardware can deliver becomes noticeable. That point for most phones arrives somewhere between 18 months and 30 months. It is not an accident that this aligns closely with the 2-year contract cycle that dominated the phone industry for a decade. Is this conspiracy? The word implies more coordination and intentionality than is probably accurate. Apple engineers are not sitting in a room deciding exactly when your phone should start to feel slow, but the incentive structures of the industry create outcomes that look very much like planned obsolescence, even if no individual decision was made with that explicit goal. The smartphone industry depends on upgrade cycles. Apple sells roughly 200 million iPhones per year. The majority of those sales are to existing iPhone users upgrading from older devices. If iPhones lasted 10 years with no perceptible performance degradation, the upgrade cycle would slow dramatically. Revenue would decline. The financial model of the company would be under pressure. It is not in Apple's interest for your 2-year-old phone to feel as fast as the new one. This is not a secret. It is basic economics. What makes it uncomfortable is the gap between this economic reality and the way manufacturers talk about their products. The right to repair movement exists in large part as a response to this dynamic. If manufacturers controlled both the hardware and the software and used that control to shorten device lifespans, then giving users the ability to repair and maintain their own hardware was one form of pushback. The European Union has moved further than most jurisdictions in this direction, requiring manufacturers to make spare parts and repair tools available for a minimum period after a product is sold. Battery replaceability has become a regulatory requirement in some markets. These are partial solutions. The deeper issue is the update cycle, and that remains almost entirely within the manufacturer's control. So what can you actually do? A few things that are worth knowing. Battery replacement is underutilized. If your phone is slowing down and your battery health is below 80%, a battery replacement, which typically costs between $30 and $80, can meaningfully restore performance. This is especially true on iPhones, where the throttling mechanism is directly tied to battery condition. A new battery is not a new phone, but it is often enough to extend useful life by another year or two. Storage management matters more than most people realize. A phone with less than 10% free storage will slow down noticeably because the operating system needs free space to write temporary files and perform background operations. Clearing old photos, apps, and cached data is not exciting advice, but it works. Delaying OS updates is a legitimate strategy for older devices. This is counterintuitive because updates include security patches, and you should eventually install them. But installing a major OS update on a device that is already at the edge of its supported hardware range often degrades performance. Waiting until the first or second point release, when Apple or Google has had time to fix the worst performance regressions, is a reasonable choice. And if you're buying a new phone, update commitment is now a meaningful spec. 7 years of updates from Samsung or Google is a real quantitative difference from 2 years of updates from a cheaper manufacturer. It changes the calculus of which phone represents actual value over its lifetime. The slowdown you feel in your 2-year-old phone is real. The causes are real. Some of them are the unavoidable physics of aging hardware and growing software demands. Some of them are the predictable result of industry incentive structures that benefit from you buying a new phone every 2 to 3 years. The line between those two things is blurry by design. Understanding where it sits is the first step to making decisions about your own devices that are based on what is actually happening, rather than the feeling, carefully cultivated, enormously profitable, that your phone is simply getting old.